everyone, welcome to my channel. Teal here. Today I have a video for you where we review 3 different types of paper. So I've been working in this Canson Montval Watercolor sketchbook for a while. I've been using it as a sketchbook versus as paper. And I've really loved the quality of it, especially compared to the Canson XL watercolor. And then my mom, who works at Hobby Lobby, told me about a clearance sale they were having, and they had this 400 series Strathmore book. It's got 60 pages, and what's a little bit strange about it is it alternates between sketch paper and watercolor paper, and the watercolor paper feels great. It's thick. It just feels like watercolor paper, and then there's the regular sketch paper. So I guess it's good for planning and then going in and doing the painting that you planned. And then I saw this Handbook Journal, and I've heard a lot of great things about Handbook. When I looked at the list that my mom sent me, I thought this was for watercolor, but it's actually it's just like a drawing kind of sketchbook. It does allow for light washes, it says in the description, so I decided to go ahead and try it out. What I didn't like about the handbook was that there was an imprint on almost every single page, like a border imprint, and I'm not sure what caused that. Maybe it was too tightly bound in packaging, but it's on every single page, some more than others, and I also noticed that each page looks almost a little bit different page to page. And just as a note, I am using Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolors on these papers. So I set them out all next to each other, and I went in with the plan to do the same exact things on each paper in the same timeline. That way I could make sure that I understood how it behaved, and they were very well compared. So I started out putting down a wash of just water so I could see how it behaves with wet on wet. Sorry if I'm sniffling a lot. I'll try to edit out most of it, but for some reason, I don't know if it's allergies or I have a cold, but my nose has just been a mess. So I went in with yellow ochre on the wet papers. It might have actually been a mix of yellow ochre and lemon yellow. And what I noticed was that the handbook, it kind of like the paint goes where you put it. In the Strathmore, it seeps in this really beautiful watercolor kind of way. And then on the Canson, it's a bit in between. So it goes where you put it, and it also kind of blends a little bit too. I added in a little bit more yellow in the corners to see how it would blend out. And like I said before, in the handbook, it kind of just, it stays where you put it. In the Strathmore, it bleeds really nicely. And in the Canson, it does something in between. So thinking about dry time, the handbook takes a very long time to dry. Strathmore dries pretty quickly, and Canson's in between. But you see, look, the handbook is still wet here, and both of the other 2 papers have dried. So now I'm going in with the subject matter of the painting for each of these, which is a head. And since I paint heads a lot, I wanted to see, what would it feel like to actually paint something that I paint often on these papers. I went in with some darker tones to start carving out the face. And then I moved on to the Strathmore. So while I was doing this one on the Strathmore, I realized I messed up a little bit on the side. So I tried to pick up the paint, and then I realized that's an important thing to know about a paper, and it wasn't picking up very well on the Strathmore. So I went ahead and decided to try it out on the handbook. And on the handbook, it picked up really easily. On the Strathmore, it did that thing that I like about it. It like bled out, and in cases like these where I need to pick up a color, it doesn't work out very well. So I guess the bleeding out of the paint on this paper is a pro and a con. And then I moved along with the Canson. And picking up the color was a bit in between on this one. I went in and I added another layer to the background. I added in some more darkness. What I like about the handbook is that even though it takes a long time to dry, once it does dry, it's very easy to layer on dark colors. I feel like with the Strathmore you have to work a little bit harder, but I do love how much the paint blends out because it makes for a really beautiful painting. Then I painted a streak of green across these to see if it would smear, and then I thought, you know what, let me just do it over the whole painting. So I did wet, just a wash of water over the entire painting, and then I added color. So on the handbook, when I just did the water, nothing really moved, but once I went in with some wet paint on top of that, it did start to move a little bit. On the Strathmore, it did a similar thing where with the water, it didn't do too much, but once I added another layer with the color, it started to move. And what was interesting about the Strathmore is it didn't necessarily smear, it kind of blended, like if you get a receipt wet or something like that, which I can think of a lot of really useful tactics for that. And then on the Canson, it didn't move at first, but then I started to notice if I went over an area, then it would really move. So with Canson, you just have to work it a little bit more. I added in some more dark to really build contrast in the face. And then I wanted to lighten up the eye space a little bit, so I tried picking up from the middle of the eyes to see, how close to white I could get. On the Canson, it did really well. On the Strathmore, it did really well too. On the handbook, it did really well as far as picking up the color, but I started to tear the paper. So the paper can't handle too much. Overall, I really love the Strathmore paper, but I do love the ability to use watercolor in the Handbook Journal. Even though it's not one of their watercolor ones, it still handles it pretty well, enough for me to use watercolors in it to plan for bigger paintings. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my video. Remember to subscribe and like, and see you next time. Have a great day.